And so she strapped on a pair of Pampers and headed off across the south so she wouldn't have to stop. She called ahead? Oh, that was good. All right. So she has are you a fan? Okay. At any rate, that's manic love. I was just kidding with you. I'm just joking. Okay. And then there's attachment, which is actually anxiety-based much of the time. Jealous love, which is possessive. Sexual love. And then there's the maternal love and paternal love, you know, the caregiving, that kind of love. So we use this one word, but we refer to so many different things. And so when someone says, I love you, it's worth, or when you feel that you love someone, it's worth thinking about, well, wait a minute, what do I mean by that? And what is that? And so here's a few things to think about. This is a pretty powerful definition. Love is the condition in which the happiness of another person is required for your own. Wow. Those of you who are parents know what I'm talking about, right? And if you're fortunate in love, if you're lucky in love, this is how you feel about your wife or your husband or your significant other. And so this may be an operational definition of love worth contemplating. Decide whether you are in love. Here's another quote. People love others not for who they are, but how they make them feel. There's a guy, I think he's brilliant. He writes these little books. They're popular, very popular. Miguel Ruiz. He wrote the 4 Agreements. That sold a bunch of copies, and so then he said, well, okay, what about the 5th Agreement? So he wrote the 5th Agreement, and then he wrote a book called The Mastery of Love. And basically, he defines love kind of like this. That's an interesting definition. And then we have Oscar Wilde. Some cause happiness wherever they go. Others, whenever they go. I've been on both sides of that fence, so I can tell you. When you get to be my age, you can see that a little bit more clearly. Or ask my kids. And here's something I just wanted to share with you from a contemporary Middle Eastern writer, Al-Hafsulif. Hub is love. Ishq is love that intertwines 2 people together. Shagaf is a love that nests in the chambers of the heart. Teth is love in which you lose yourself. Wala is a love that carries sorrow within it. Sabaha is a love that exudes from your pores. Hawa is a love that shares its name with air and with falling. And Ram is a love that's willing to pay the price. We're going to move to the mind now. A lot easier than the heart, for sure. There is nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so. This is Shakespeare speaking through Hamlet. And this particular statement is literally the core teaching, one of the core teachings of every wisdom tradition, every psychological understanding, every philosophical understanding, and now neurobiological understanding that it is our thinking that creates our world. So there's nothing good or bad, but thinking makes it so. According to Marcus Aurelius, the whole universe is change, and life is what you deem it to be. And how true is that? It's so interesting. Some people I meet, they say, you know, there's just, life is so short. I tend to prefer that kind of person to the other ones who say life is so long. And so you can ask yourself, is life short or is life long? Because depending on your attitude towards it, that's going to determine the kind of life you have, literally. Your mind determines your life. There is no absolute reality. There is a perception of reality that your brain creates. And this, whether you call it, there's a lot of other words for it, Maya, illusion, ignorance, so on and so forth. But the bottom line is that your mind creates your reality. So if you change your mind, you can change your reality. In the 70s, I was a young student, and I used to like to hang out at MIT. There's all kinds of great computers and robots and geeks and great stuff. And there was a conference there where neuroscientists, and I love neurobiology. I love neurobiology. The Dalai Lama was there. He was a young man. And he was, quote, debating neuroscientists. And the most extraordinary thing happened, and it changed my life forever. I noticed that he was not debating. He was trying to understand. He was trying to learn something. He was trying to, and my professors, some of whom were my heroes, were instinctively trying to defend a hypothesis, trying to defend a position, trying to promote their own importance, so on and so forth. This monk from Tibet had none of these things. What he had instead was this incredible serenity and joyfulness, and those of you who've run into him know this is true, and this incredible clarity of mind. And he cut him to ribbons. It was amazing. He wasn't trying to, but the fact that his mind was uncluttered with self-importance, uncluttered with his own agenda, uncluttered with him trying to advance himself, he was able to see things that were so obvious to everybody, except obvious to no one, because everyone was trying to defend their own position and their own ponies in the show, or their own egos. So anyway, he asked this question: can thinking change the mind? Back then we didn't have the technology. Now we do. For example, and this is very important to the Buddhists, because they use meditation and contemplation and mind exercises, etc., to change people's character, to bring them closer to reality, to illumination, etc. Well, now we know. Well, we know, for example, that the hippocampus of taxi drivers in London is much bigger than bus drivers, even though they spend the same amount of time driving and they're basically the same ages and so on and so forth. Because it's much more complicated to be a taxi cab driver, the roads in London are very, very convoluted, whereas the bus drivers just stay on one route. Mental stimulation increases the number of connections in the brain. Remember I showed you those connections? So we know that experience increases the number of connections, and even thinking about experience changes your connections. And some of your peak performance coaches, etc., will have people visualize, kicking that perfect field goal or shooting that perfect free throw. Because just thinking about it changes connections in the brain. And this also goes along with our mirror neuron discovery. According to the demands of life, we shift and we grow different parts of our brains. And this is one of the reasons why professional musicians have a larger part of the brain. They have the largest part of the musical brain because they're using it for professional reasons. Amateurs have a slightly smaller, and then people that just play what's it called? Guitar Hero. Theirs is a little bit bigger, but not a whole lot bigger, Guitar Hero. But we also know it from our friend the squirrel monkeys, who, by the way, think we're a little squirrely too. So anyway, we put them in cages, and they put food in these little bitty wells outside the cage, and they have to reach and grab a pellet, and they need 240 of these an hour in order to survive. So they have to, the problem is it takes 30 seconds to get one of them. Well, if you set up this circumstance and leave them there, their brains grow, and the areas that they need to figure out how to get their hand out and get the little pellet and get it fast. And you can show how the necessity of life. So if you want to be happy, increase your necessity, increase your intent, and you will develop capacities that you need to achieve those goals. Your brain is actually your friend. A few more examples. Meditation increases the size of the left prefrontal cortex. If you juggle, this part of your brain gets bigger. So you can literally, we used to think, and this is news too, because, it was dogma that you didn't grow new brain cells in adulthood. False. We know now. Now, a little fun with neuroplasticity, just I think people should know this. Also about 25 years ago, this guy discovered that if you put electrodes over the skull, like an EEG, and then you send the signal to a computer, the computer can take those signals and use them to control the rudder of a boat or the wing flaps of a plane, and you can train the person who's got the electrodes in the skull cap to just think about steering to the right or steering to the left or going up or down. Just think. No touching, no verbal, no nothing. Just thinking. And they can control that boat or that plane or that robot. The reason you don't know about this is because the Department of Defense is working on this thing like crazy. And guess what we're going to do with it? We're going to make a weapon out of it. It's also being used for some paralyzed folks, so that's good news. But the fact of the matter is that we can literally control objects with our thoughts alone, outside of ourselves. So we live in very interesting times. Boredom. I was going to talk about boredom. And then I realized it was too boring. So I'm going to skip that and just show you that where you want to be is to have your challenge match your skill level. That's flow. That's being there. That's being in the present and do it. So if you're bored, there's a mismatch between your skill level and what you should be doing, or there's a lack of diversity in the kinds of things you're doing. Don't be bored. I mean, that's really a horrible, horrible way to live. Do you remember ever watching the clock and you can't wait till 5 o'clock? Don't live that way. It's a horrible thing to do to a human being, to do to a mind, a brain with 300 billion neurons and all this possibility, and to sit there just bored out of your mind watching the clock is a crime, in my opinion. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit about affective contagion, then we're going to take a short break, 5-minute break. It's not just you, there's also negativity that can exist at home or in the workplace or among your friends or whatever. And the thing is, it's like secondhand smoke. It does affect you. And one of the ways I know this is that when I was a medical student, one of the things that we were shown was that the resident could interview a patient who had some kind of psychiatric disorder in front of about 20 people. So here's the resident, here's the patient, and the resident interviews the patient. There's people in the audience, nurses and med students and so on and so forth. The patient gets up and leaves, and then the experienced professor comes in and makes the diagnosis. Oh, a depressed patient, or oh, a manic patient, or oh, a schizophrenic patient, without seeing the patient and without hearing a word. And the way he or she was able to do that was because they could just walk in and they could feel the affect. That's called affective contagion. You can feel the imprint that a depressed or a negative or an angry person leaves on a room. You can feel it if you sensitize, if you're open to it. Try it. You'll be able to feel it. Walk into a boardroom after the executives have finished whatever they're doing in there. God knows what they're doing in there, but whatever it is, try that. Okay, let's see an example here. I'd like to show a little film and see if you agree with me on this. Can we run that?
Dong. Long.
1,000 connections per second that brain is making. And the reason that kid is so joyful is because its brain is getting exactly what it needs. And it's creating this feedback loop, and it creates this joy not in the guy too and in all of us. And that's one of the ways in which we're interconnected. And just like this can be true for joy, it can also be true for, I'm sorry to say, for negativity, so you want to avoid that. We're going to take a 5-minute break. Please come back because we got to get down to the real business and run through it real quick. So 5 minutes. Thank you. So the first thing to be understood is that being happy is not something you pursue, it's something you become. Okay? So many people have made the error, I've done it myself, of going out and trying to find themselves. You don't find yourself. You create yourself. This is critical. You have to take responsibility for your own life. You can think of your life as a painter thinks of a painting. You can create, you can design your life. You're the only one responsible for it. And taking that responsibility seriously and realizing that you can consciously cultivate happiness is the first step. But as you know, from the elephant and the rider analogy, being, just having the thoughts, oh, I'm going to do this differently or whatever, is not enough. So you need to overcome inertia or train that elephant. Knowing's not the same thing as doing. What percentage of New Year's resolutions go anywhere after a month? Less than 20%. 44% of doctors are overweight while they're telling you to lose weight. Mark, have you ever seen those little coupons that say, we'll give you 20% off, just mail the rebate in? Well, they know you're not going to mail the rebate. Okay, that's called inertia. But the thing is, you can use inertia to work for you, not against you. For example, if there's something you don't want in your life, if there's something you want less of, say, well, actually you have mixed feelings about it, Haagen-Dazs, Cherry Garcia. God, I love that stuff. Anyway, instead of it being in the refrigerator, leave it at the store. So that means in order to get your half pint of Haagen-Dazs, or I guess it's Ben and Jerry's, sorry, you have to get dressed, get in the car, drive to the store, buy the stuff, pay for it, come back home, get back in bed, get a spoon, and then eat your Cherry Garcia. Much less likely to happen. So that's creating obstacles, creating more inertia. You can use it the other way. Let's say you want to go to the gym. You can leave your gym bag packed right there by the door or in the car. You can have a coffee maker set to go off at a certain time. You can sleep in your gym clothes. You can do anything you can do to make it more likely, and then once you've done it for a while, it becomes what they call second nature. In other words, nothing is difficult once you're used to it. Remember? So you can use inertia for you. Willpower is not very effective. Willpower is about as effective for many of these situations as it is for diarrhea. It just doesn't cut it. If all we needed was willpower, we'd never hear about religious leaders being caught with their pants down, or politicians tapping their foots and whatever. I don't know what that was about, but anyway. You need to gently shift your mindset. If you believe me today that happiness can be consciously cultivated, and you decide that you consciously want to be happy, you can do that. But in order to do that, you have to pay attention. Paying attention is half the battle. Studies have been done. There was something, and I'm grateful to Susan True for this. She pointed out an article in New Yorker in which some scientists had used an iPhone app, to study people as they went about their day, and it turned out half the time they weren't paying attention to what they were doing. And that inversely correlated with happiness. In other words, if you're paying attention, you're happier than if you're not. But we live in a completely scatterbrained nation, and so we have to pay attention. And so you need to pay attention to your tonal, to your heart, to your mind, to your body, and to your purpose. So you have to pay attention. Now some people are always the shouldas and the couldas and the da-da-da-da-da. Well, okay, let me tell you this story. The story is an ancient story. It's about a young disciple that goes to the master, the wise master, and says, "Master, is it better to be old or is it better to be young?" The wise old master strokes his beard and says, "Well, that depends. Do you want your mistakes in front of you or behind you?" And that's the only choice you have in life. So take your pick. Behave your way into a new way of thinking, not the other way around. Remember, training the elephant. Use that inertia issue. And once again, nothing's difficult once you're used to it. You have to put your problems in perspective. And one of the ways to do this is something you might want to think about when you have a problem. Think, is this going to matter in a week? Is this going to matter in a month? Is this going to matter in a year? Is this going to matter in 5 years? Literally, think about that. When you have a problem, think about that. And put them in order and put them in perspective. You can't be happy if you're just focused on yourself and your problems, and most of your problems, like Mark Twain also said very famously, there's been many catastrophes in my life. Thank God most of them never happen. There's a lot of truth in that. Don't take things personally. This is the first agreement, I think, or the second agreement of Miguel Ruiz. It's really not about you. Don't worry about the small stuff, that's pretty obvious. Learn from your mistakes, but also learn that whenever someone's really messing up and it's affecting you or whatever, remember they're teaching you too. So when somebody gets really, really angry, they're teaching you what anger looks like. They're teaching you just how smart you are when you're angry, how intelligent you are. I was in a spa with a guy, really, I live in Menlo Park where my private practice is, and I was in a dry sauna, and some guy comes in and he dumps half a cup of water onto the rocks, which would be fine if it was a wet sauna, but in a dry sauna that creates all kinds of problems. I mean, it raises the temperature and it creates steam that will literally burn you because it's much hotter. So I thought about it to myself, well, how can I say this in a way that, because I don't think he knew that doing that was dangerous to the other people, because there were some pretty old people, even older than me in there. So, at any rate, I said, listen, pardon me, but I feel like I need to warn you that if you pour hot water on there, that it raises the temperature such that this place becomes dangerous, and people can get burned, and also they can have people with heart conditions can be hurt by that. He said, well, how do you know? I said, well, I'm a doctor, and he said, well, what's a doctor doing in a sauna? That's how intelligent you get when you're angry. People come, and it's as if they want me to fix their past. Give up all hope of a better past. Just remember that. Give up all hope of a better past. Not even God can change the past. And when some people spend so much time either with one foot in the past, the other one in the future, they're never in the present, and they're missing life. What is it John Lennon says? Life is what happens when you're busy making other plans, something like that. Now here's an interesting thing that we learned from the Buddhists. The Buddhists, our anger management is basically don't get angry. In ancient mind science traditions in the East, which I've spent quite a bit of time with, in addition to the Western stuff, they don't tell you not to get angry, they tell you to practice patience. They don't tell you what not to do, they tell you what to do. And this is interesting because patience is a brain capacity. There's the amygdala and there's the cortex. Remember, there's the heart of the brain, or that midbrain part, and then there's the cortex, the thinking part. You can literally strengthen the inhibitory pathways. By practicing patience, you can become more patient. You've changed your brain. And it's as if, and so when you run into people that are angry or whatever, you should be grateful because that's a chance to practice it. And it's like, if you, let's say you wanted to build your biceps up. You really want to beef up your biceps. And you went around the day, and people were kind enough to leave barbells, lying around, so you could just pick one up and just do a few curls, It's the same thing with practicing patience. You can literally, when people get angry or whatever, you can use that to practice with. And so the active, purposeful practice of patience, rather than not practicing the other, is a much more effective way. So this is a brain capacity, and you can cultivate it just like any other one. And it's a good one to have in the workplace, at home, and just for your own peace of mind. Most people do bad stuff not because they're bad, but because they're ignorant. They don't know any better. And if you look at situations, you'll find that that's usually the case. So the other principle, you have to pay attention. It's okay to simplify your life. David, it's okay to simplify your life. Half the time you're not focused on what you're doing. We live in the scatterbrain nation. Notice the copyright, because I'm hoping to get this book out sometime soon. A recent article in the journal Science reports inattention correlates with less happiness. This is that article from the New York Times. Showing up is half the battle. And paying attention, again, to your heart, mind, body, and soul, and pay attention to what matters. The other thing that's been shown to be absolutely essential for happiness is to grow in self-knowledge. This is something that's amazing. Who would have thought this? But if you are not growing, you are shrinking. If you are not learning about yourself and your mind and your heart and your purpose, you are literally shriveling. So you have to grow in self-knowledge. This is not an opinion. This is documented. Happy people, as they age, grow in self-knowledge. So cultivating self-knowledge is critical. Like I said before, your mistakes are either ahead of you or behind you. So don't dwell on them. Actually, you can be glad to say, well, I got that one behind me. So, that's the way it is. Frankly, meditation, which has been practiced by every religious tradition and by serious thinkers and serious people and different forms, and contemplation, whether it be with malas or with rosaries or with sitting quietly with a candle or whatever floats your boat. But the point is some quiet time to calm the mind and also to think. Correlates very, very strongly. Just 10 minutes in the morning, 15 before you start tearing off to work on the freeway. Remember, behave your way into a new way of thinking. Don't try and think your way into a new way of behaving. And think about your life consciously and deliberately. You're responsible, not your parents, not your kids. It's your life. You can design it. You can create it however you want. You don't find yourself, you create yourself. With regard to purpose, I see many times people decide, oh, I need a purpose, and then they go out looking frantically to find their purpose. They get on a plane and they fly to Zambia or something like that, and they're going to rescue the lizards there, which is fine. But sometimes they get there and they go, wait a minute, what am I doing here with these lizards in Zambia? It seemed like a good idea at the time. The point is that purpose will come to you. The way nature is designed, you don't have to worry about it. This is something that wise people have talked about.